tempers flaring, pushing, shoving, officials holding them back.
That is Jaire Alexander, a man paid to stop Stefon Diggs, losing his composure before the game even starts. But then his own teammate, a man who ran routes beside him, caught passes with him, fought for the same Super Bowl, said this:
"Don't know what he's gonna say,
and I don't like him."
So what is it about Stefon Diggs that makes everyone in his orbit feel some type of way? We found 10 players with the answer, and last one will make your jaw drop. Jaire Alexander. Some rivalries in the NFL are born on the field. They build slowly. A big play here, a response there, until two players finally acknowledge what everyone watching has already seen. And then there is Jaire Alexander and Stefon Diggs. Because this one did not wait for the field. It started in the tunnel, before the whistle, before the coin toss, before either man had technically played a single meaningful snap. October 2022, Buffalo Bills at Lambeau Field. What should have been a routine walk from the locker room to the field became something that CBS cameras caught, and the internet could not stop replaying. Diggs followed Alexander through the tunnel. Alexander turned around. Words were exchanged, pointed, personal, and loud enough for everyone nearby to feel the temperature shift. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not two strangers bumping into each other. It was two men who had a history and a score to settle and zero patience for pretending otherwise.
Tempers are flaring. Just check this out.
That is the broadcast. That is the moment it crossed from trash talk into something the world had to stop and look at, and it escalated immediately.
This is when trash talk leads to some pushing and shoving. You see Diggs there, Keisean Nixon mixing it up.
Pushing, shoving, multiple bodies involved before the game even had a chance to answer the questions both men were asking. And then came the backstory from the sideline reporter who had been watching this unfold up close. This was never just a Houston-Green Bay thing. This was a Stefon Diggs and Jaire Alexander thing, rooted in matchups that predated either man's current team, stretching back to when Diggs was a Viking and the two were already finding reasons to jaw at each other. Buffalo won that 2022 game 27-17. Diggs finished with 6 catches, 108 yards, and a touchdown. The scoreboard backed him up entirely, and his post-game statement was exactly what you would expect from a man who had been looking for that opportunity since the tunnel. "I don't give a who started it, I finished it. I got the win." Alexander did not fold. His response carried the same unapologetic energy. "Nah, I don't either. I finished it." Same tone, same certainty. Two men standing in the smoke of a game they both claim to have won, neither one willing to give the other a single inch. And then, 2 years later, they did it again. 2024, Texans versus Packers. Pre-game warm-ups. Diggs was wearing a different jersey. He was on a different team, in a different city, a different chapter of his career. And none of that mattered. He heard chirping from the Packers sideline. He did not ignore it. He did not walk to his own sideline and let his coordinator handle it. He walked directly across the field, alone, straight toward Alexander.
Stefon Diggs, Jaire Alexander, Keisean Nixon, all getting involved. You can sense the tension down here.
You could feel it through every screen showing the broadcast. The officials had to step between them. Multiple Packers players converged, and what was supposed to be routine pre-game movement became a national sports story. Diggs spoke after that game and delivered what may be the single most honest sentence he has ever said publicly. "I don't give a if I'm by myself or with a million. I'm never the bigger person. I ain't let go. Never the bigger person. Will not let it go. Alone or with an army, same answer." That is not a quote from a man who got caught in a moment. That is a philosophy. And Jaire Alexander is the person who has consistently brought that philosophy out of him more than anyone else on this entire list. Alexander has not publicly elaborated beyond game day comments, and he does not need to. The consistency says everything. Across multiple years, multiple team matchups, multiple cities, these two men keep finding each other, keep choosing each other. That is not coincidence. That is what a real rivalry looks like. If Jaire Alexander is the headline of the Packers-Diggs conflict, Keisean Nixon is the exclamation point, because Nixon did not have years of built-up history with Stefon Diggs. Keisean Nixon. The 2024 pregame incident before Texans-Packers had already become a situation the moment Diggs started walking toward the Green Bay side of the field. Most players in Nixon's position watch. They hang back. They let the two established names settle whatever it is they need to settle, not Nixon. He stepped forward. He got loud. He got physical. He inserted himself directly into a confrontation that was already drawing officials and cameras, and he made clear that if Diggs wanted a problem with one Packer, he was going to get a problem with all of them. Multiple players converged. Officials pushed between multiple bodies. What should have been a warm-up turned into a news segment. And through all of it, Nixon was not on the sideline watching. He was in the middle of it. The mentality that puts Nixon in the middle of that situation is the same mentality that defines everything about how he plays football. In a different game, a heated divisional battle where Nixon picked up a roughness penalty that raised some eyebrows. He was asked about it directly.
Keisean, what happened before you got called for that roughness penalty? It looked like you were getting choked out.
The suggestion that Nixon was the one being victimized in the exchange was met with the exact response you would expect from a man who walked towards Stefon Diggs before a game.
I don't know about getting choked out. I ain't never got choked out, but
What happened? Because it seemed like you were just retaliating.
I ain't never got choked out. There it is. That is the entire Nixon worldview compressed into one sentence. And then the framework that explains exactly why he was the one standing next to Alexander when Diggs came walking over.
it's a division game. It's gonna always be like that.
Nixon was quoted directly after the pregame scuffle, saying that as top-flight defensive backs, they do not take disrespect, and when someone starts something, they finish it, which is a sentence Stefon Diggs has essentially said about himself in multiple press conferences across multiple seasons. Two men, identical philosophies, and zero chance that combination ever ends quietly. What makes Nixon's entry sit this high is not just what he did, it is the speed at which he did it. He had no personal grudge. He had no years of rivalry to draw from. He saw a teammate in a confrontation with Stefon Diggs, and he walked directly into it without hesitation. That tells you more about Nixon's character than any stat line. And it tells you something about Diggs, too, that even people with no personal history feel compelled to respond to whatever energy he brings into a space. Xavier Rhodes. This one is different because Xavier Rhodes is not a rival. He is not an enemy. He is not someone who ever stood across from Diggs on a field wearing different colors and made a decision to make his life difficult. Xavier Rhodes loved Stefon Diggs the way you love a brother, ferociously, frustratingly, and with absolutely no ability to turn it off, even when turning it off would have been the smarter choice. In August 2018, in Minnesota Vikings training camp, two of the best players on a team that had genuine Super Bowl aspirations, two men who practiced against each other every single day and were both constitutionally incapable of treating any rep as unimportant, and on a day that should have been another routine session in a long summer of preparation, it boiled over.
Is it equivalent of being sent up to your room by Zimmer, kind of like a sibling spat because you guys are just intense in practice? What's your take?
We're competitive.
Sibling spat. The reporter is being diplomatic. What actually happened was this. Diggs caught a long touchdown pass during practice and celebrated emphatically, throwing the ball into the stands. Rhodes did not appreciate it. Words started, voices escalated. The next day, it carried over into something physical enough and loud enough that head coach Mike Zimmer, a man who has never been accused of being soft, pulled both of them from practice entirely, called them undisciplined, made them sit. Rhodes spoke about it afterward, and his framing is worth listening to carefully.
We compete each and every day, but foremost, we family first.
That is the foundation, not malice, not hatred, not two people who fundamentally could not coexist. Competition so intense, it had nowhere left to go but into a confrontation. And then the piece that matters most. And then the single line that explains the entire story in 10 words.
Nah, it was just the competitive nature in us, you know. I didn't want to lose, he didn't want to lose, and
There it is. That is all of it. Not ego, not immaturity, not two men who needed to be separated because they genuinely despised each other. Two men who wanted to win so badly that they could not stand losing to each other in a practice on a random Thursday in August, in a drill that would not show up in any box score anywhere. And when competition sits that deep in two people, eventually something breaks. They came back the next day. Both addressed the team. Both acknowledged accountability. Both described it as a brotherhood thing. Brothers argue, brothers fight, brothers come back. And that is exactly what happened. Diggs himself described it as nothing that needed burying. Rhodes called it the natural result of two competitors who refused to accept anything less than the best version of each other every single day. But they got ejected from practice by Mike Zimmer during training camp. And that is a sentence that does not happen to just anyone. Josh Jobe. Super Bowl LX, February 2026, New England Patriots versus Seattle Seahawks. And somewhere in the fourth quarter, with the entire world watching, Stefon Diggs and Josh Jobe decided to make it personal. Jobe is a cornerback built for exactly this kind of moment. Physical, relentless, comfortable in coverage against the league's best receivers. The kind of player who has been in big games and knows how to keep his head when stakes are highest. And for 3 quarters, he played like it. But then Jobe delivered a late hit on Diggs out of bounds, and whatever composure had been governing the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl evaporated immediately. Video showed Diggs grabbing Jobe's face mask, Jobe reportedly punching Diggs in the head and face area, teammates and officials piling in from multiple directions. A brawl at the Super Bowl, with the championship on the line and the entire world watching every frame. That happened because Stefon Diggs was on the field. Now, the most interesting thing about Josh Jobe in the context of this story is who he was before that moment. Because the Jobe who appeared in press conferences and post-game interviews throughout the regular season was not a man who seemed capable of throwing punches in the fourth quarter of the biggest game of his life. He was measured, team first, the kind of player coaches point to when they want to talk about doing things the right way.
I mean, it's next man up. It's the standard that we set, and gotta keep a high standard.
Standards. That is what Jobe talked about. That is the language he used when describing himself and his team. A man committed to a standard of accountability and professionalism. We all as one. We stand together.
It doesn't matter who's on the field. We all as one, and we stand together. That's the main thing.
That is a man who has processed his role and made peace with it. And then Stefon Diggs walked into his Super Bowl and undid every word of that in about 4 seconds. Neither player made substantial public comments about each other after the game. Diggs focused his post-game remarks on team pride following the Patriots' loss. Jobe said nothing for the record. Coverage described it as a heated, isolated in-game moment, the kind of explosion that happens when championship pressure meets two players who both refuse to back down from anything. But isolated does not mean small. There is nothing small about throwing a punch at the Super Bowl, and there is nothing small about being the man who caused it. Laquon Treadwell. There is a video. You have almost certainly seen it, and if you have not, you are about to understand exactly why it refuses to go away, no matter how many times it gets taken down, re-uploaded, buried, and resurfaced. It is a Minnesota Vikings locker room segment, one of those fun, lighthearted questionnaire clips that teams produce to give fans a glimpse behind the curtain. It was supposed to be harmless. It was supposed to generate laughs and shares and nothing more. And then someone asked who on the team you would least want dating your sister. Laquon Treadwell did not hesitate for a single second.
At least I should date my sister, Diggs. 100%.
Why Diggs?
100%, not probably, not leaning. Toward 100, with a dismissive laugh that made it clear the answer required almost no cognitive effort whatsoever. And then the explanation, which landed harder than the name itself. According to reporting on this segment, the description of Diggs that followed was specific and detailed, the kind of character read that only comes from genuine, daily, up-close observation of a person. This was not a guess. This was a verdict.
Because he's not a guy that you want to bring home to your parents.
Not a guy you bring home to your parents. Coming from a teammate, coming from someone who has shared every professional space Diggs occupies for multiple seasons. And then the line that has been screenshotted, quoted, and replayed more than anything else in this video. The video was framed at the time as locker room humor, the kind of playful roasting that teammates do and nobody takes seriously. And maybe in the room in that moment, that is exactly what it was. But words do not disappear. They wait. They sit in the archive until the right moment arrives to make them feel completely different from how they were originally intended. And when Diggs' name started making different kinds of headlines years later, this video came back, and "I don't like him" did not sound like a joke anymore. It sounded like a confession. Treadwell has never revisited it publicly. He has not elaborated, walked it back, or provided any context. The record is what it is, and Laquon Treadwell's name is permanently attached to it. Adam Thielen. Thielen was Diggs' co-star, his daily partner. For years, the two of them were one of the most productive, most watched, most talked about wide receiver duos in the entire NFL. They won together. They created together. On the field, they made each other better every single Sunday. And then came the locker room video. Same segment, same question. Who on this team would you least want dating your sister? According to reporting on the clip, Thielen's answer was slow, deliberate, and emphatic. The kind of answer you give when you want to make sure there is absolutely no ambiguity about who you mean. Diggs, 100%. He's just not a guy that you want to bring home to your parents, from the man who ran routes beside him every week. Now, Diggs was in that same video, and at a certain point, the interviewer informed him that he was becoming the runaway consensus answer to the question. Here is how Diggs handled that information.
And I might add, you're starting to be the runaway favorite for this.
But nobody want me to do this, is it?
He knew. He was already aware that his own teammates had landed on him, and his response was confident, defensive, but calm. And then,
I'm a great guy. I'm actually a great guy.
There's actually seems to be a few guys that don't think that.
Feel differently about me?
Yeah.
From the man who lined up beside him, ran the same routes, caught passes from the same quarterbacks, celebrated in the same end zones for multiple seasons. If Adam Thielen does not know Stefon Diggs well enough, then who does? That question does not have a satisfying answer, and the silence around it says more than either man has said publicly since the video resurfaced. Diggs reportedly gave Thielen a soft acknowledgement in his broader response to the clip, the only person in the video he named specifically in his comeback, which may be the most Diggs thing imaginable, saving the one specific call out for the person who was supposed to be his closest ally. Dalvin Cook. Same Minnesota Vikings locker room video, same question. And Dalvin Cook, one of the most popular, most widely liked, most universally respected players on that team, did not stop to deliberate, did not hedge, did not try to be diplomatic or choose someone safer or less controversial. He named Diggs instantly. Cook's facial expression and the speed of his answer were widely noted as some of the most comedic moments in the clip. And that matters, because Dalvin Cook is genuinely well liked. He is not someone who looks for reasons to take shots at teammates. He is not provocative. He is not the kind of player who builds his image on being edgy or controversial. He is warm, team-oriented, and known for exactly the kind of easy, loose personality that makes locker rooms function well. And even he said Diggs immediately. Think about the significance of that for a moment. In a room full of professional athletes who protect each other instinctively, who understand that cameras are rolling and that words have lives beyond the moment they are spoken, the name that kept coming up was Stefon Diggs. From every direction, from close friends, from position partners, from the most likable guy on the roster. It was not one person's opinion, it was a chorus. Diggs responded to the resurfaced video with the energy of someone who had prepared for exactly this kind of challenge. Dismissive, group-targeted, refusing to take it seriously in public, even if privately he understood perfectly what the video meant. Cook has not revisited it. No statement, no clarification, no public anything beyond the clip itself, which is its own kind of answer. Because here is the thing, Dalvin Cook did not have to say Diggs. Nobody in that room was forced to say any particular name. It was a fun question with a million possible answers, and the man who plays running back on a team with 40+ other options went straight to Diggs without blinking. That is not an accident, that is a reputation. Rasul Douglas. Rasul Douglas's entry on this list is the one that is hardest to explain from the outside, because what he and Diggs produced together in October 2022 was not a long-running feud, was not a history of bad blood, and was not anything that had been building across multiple seasons. It was a single moment, one game, one touchdown, one explosion, and it was enough. The Bills-Packers game that month was already tense, with the Packers secondary, including Douglas, loud against Diggs throughout. For most wide receivers in the NFL, that kind of noise from the defense is a part of the landscape, something you process, file away, and use as motivation when the ball comes your way. You do not turn it into a confrontation. You let the scoreboard do the talking. Stefon Diggs is not most wide receivers. When Diggs scored that touchdown, 60 minutes of accumulated trash talk reached its breaking point. Teammates physically had to restrain him from going directly at Douglas in the middle of the field, not gently pull him away, physically restrain him from a man he had just beaten in a game he was currently winning after scoring a touchdown. None of that was enough. He still needed to finish the conversation in person. Diggs later made no specific effort to separate Douglas from the Packers secondary in his post-game comments. He grouped them together as part of his broader "I finished it" statement. His entire response was built on the assertion that the win validated him, the performance validated him, and anyone who had been talking on that field had been answered. What gives Douglas's entry its particular texture is that his broader commentary about Diggs across separate occasions has been notably generous, describing him in terms of his drive and his desire to win, which creates this specific, strange dynamic. A man who watched Diggs have to be physically pulled away from going after him, who then turns around and gives a thoughtful, nuanced, complimentary read on who Diggs is as a competitor. That duality, the chaos of the on-field moment and the measured respect of the reflection, is perhaps the most accurate portrait of what it actually means to compete against Stefon Diggs. You might hate the experience in the moment. You might end up respecting the person when the smoke clears. Antonio Brown. Of everything on this list, Antonio Brown's entry is the one with the least justification and the most aggression, because Antonio Brown and Stefon Diggs have no documented on-field history whatsoever. They were never teammates. They never played against each other in a meaningful game. There is no shared history of competition or professional friction to point to. What exists is one January 2026 social media post, one-sided, targeted, and condemned the moment it appeared. After the New England Patriots advanced to Super Bowl LX, a locker room photo of Diggs circulated online. It showed a visible leopard print tattoo on his lower back, the kind of detail that gets noted briefly and then forgotten within a news cycle. Antonio Brown did not forget it. He did not scroll past it. Brown reposted the photo with derogatory, homophobic language, explicit, pointed, and designed to cause maximum embarrassment, rather than make any meaningful point about football or competition. The reaction was immediate and wide. The condemnation came from multiple directions. And Diggs, the man who has publicly stated on multiple occasions that he is never the bigger person and will not let anything go, said absolutely nothing, did not engage, did not respond, did not give Brown a single word to work with. That silence deserves to be acknowledged, because Brown did not pick this fight because of any football-related grievance. He picked it because he could, because a photo existed and a platform existed, and there was a moment of Diggs-related attention that he could redirect toward himself. It was not a rivalry. It was not even a legitimate conflict. It was one man deciding to use his reach to hurt someone else for no reason beyond the desire to be seen doing it. Diggs gave Brown nothing, and nothing, in this case, was the right answer. Andrew Sendejo. We end the list where the volume is lowest and the story is most about proximity than anything else. Andrew Sendejo, safety, Minnesota Vikings. A man whose entire place on this countdown rests on one fact: he was there. It was August 2018 training camp. Xavier Rhodes and Stefon Diggs were in the process of having the kind of practice fight that gets coaches involved, gets players benched, and gets written about by local reporters for the rest of the summer. Sendejo was in that space. He was reported to be involved in the heated shouting exchanges that broke out around the central conflict. Not the principal figure, not the man at the center of the disciplinary action, but present and audible and caught up in whatever energy had taken over that practice field. He faced no discipline. He made no public statement. He never elaborated in any interview, gave no quote about Diggs, expressed no opinion in any direction. His connection to this story begins and ends in that single practice in August 2018. And yet, his name is in the article. His name is in the reporting. Because when Stefon Diggs becomes a story, the people in his vicinity become part of the story whether they planned on it or not. That is the thing about Diggs that the Sendejo entry illustrates more clearly than any other on this list. You do not have to seek him out. You do not have to have a rivalry with him, or a grudge against him, or a history of any kind. You just have to be in the room. The gravity of whatever Diggs creates pulls people in. Sendejo did not walk into that practice looking to be part of a news story, and yet, here he is, the final entry on a countdown of players who found themselves, in one way or another, permanently linked to the ongoing, escalating, impossible to ignore story of Stefon Diggs. The NFL is objectively a more interesting, more electric, more compelling product because players like Stefon Diggs exist within it, even when, especially when, they are driving everyone around them to the edge of something they cannot fully control. That is the list. And knowing Stefon Diggs, it is probably not finished growing.